Emily had always loved the night. While most of the town shuttered its windows and drew the curtains tight after sundown, she waited for the moment when the last threads of daylight dissolved into the horizon and the first glimmers appeared overhead. Her house stood on the edge of the countryside, where the land rolled out in open fields broken only by the occasional cluster of bare-limbed trees. No street lamps intruded here, no hum of traffic drowned the night air, just wind moving through grass and the faint rustle of small creatures in the dark. From her bedroom window, she could see more of the sky than most people ever bothered to look at. She had memorized the constellations the way others might memorize song lyrics, tracing them in her mind until she could find them without thinking, the bright scatter of Orion in winter, the arching spine of Cassiopeia, the dim and steady glow of distant clusters. All of it was part of a quiet rhythm that she returned to night after night. That particular evening in late October had the sharp clarity that comes after a cold front sweeps through. The air felt newly scrubbed, the kind that made sound travel farther and stars burn sharper. She carried a blanket to the small hill behind the house, a place where she could lie back without trees blocking her view. The grass there was dry underfoot, whispering as she settled down. Above her, the sky unfolded in its familiar infinite sprawl. She stayed like that for a long time, letting her thoughts drift with the slow turn of the constellations. Occasionally, she would spot the brief flare of a meteor, a needle-thin streak of white darting between stars, and feel the small thrill of witnessing something fleeting. The world beneath her seemed far away, reduced to the faint outline of her house in the dark and the smell of earth cooling after the day. The stars were constant. Even when the seasons shifted and one set of constellations gave way to another, they moved in patterns she could trust. There was a comfort in their permanence, the knowledge that the same points of light had been shining long before she was born and would continue long after she was gone. But that night, as she traced the familiar angle of the summer triangle overhead, something shifted. At first, it was so subtle she thought she had only blinked. A bright point of light, one she was sure had been there a moment ago, was simply gone. She sat up, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and searched the patch of sky where it had been. The other stars around it still shone in their places, crisp and unwavering, but in the exact spot where the missing star should have been, there was only emptiness. Not cloud, not the thin haze that sometimes dulled a star's light, just black, smooth and featureless, as if something had erased it completely. She scanned the horizon for passing clouds, but the air was perfectly clear. The other stars glittered with the cold steadiness of a cloudless night. The absence was too precise, too sudden. Lying back again, she kept her eyes fixed on that part of the sky. Minutes passed. The darkness where the star had been did not change. The longer she looked at it, the more it seemed unlike the rest of the night around it, not just empty, but deeper somehow, as if the black there went further than the black anywhere else. The wind shifted, brushing over the grass and sending a shiver up her arms. She pulled the blanket tighter and told herself that stars flickered out all the time, that maybe this one had simply reached the end of its life, far away, and the light had finally taken this long to vanish. She knew enough about astronomy to know that was possible, but it didn't feel like that. Something about the silence of the night had changed when it went dark. The sound of the wind seemed fainter, as though it too were keeping its distance from that patch of sky. The other stars felt different. She couldn't explain how, only that the sky no longer seemed entirely still, as though something in it had shifted, tiny but deliberate. She stayed until the cold began to sink through the blanket, her gaze returning again and again to the empty spot. It didn't fill in. It didn't fade further. It simply remained. When she finally rose and made her way back to the house, she glanced over her shoulder one last time. The missing star seemed almost to pull at her vision, the way a strange noise in the dark makes you turn your head whether you want to or not. She shut the door quickly behind her, locking it though there was no one for miles. That night, as she lay in bed, her eyes kept drifting to the window and the strip of sky visible beyond the glass. The emptiness was there, just as sharp, just as exact. It felt less like a star had gone out, and more like something had taken its place. The next night, the air was softer, though still touched by the cool bite of autumn. Emily returned to the hill as the last traces of daylight sank away, carrying the same blanket, though now her eyes kept finding that patch of sky before she even settled down. The missing star was still gone. It looked exactly as it had the night before, a clean, unnatural absence in the sky's sprawl of light. She watched for hours, scanning the constellations, tracing familiar patterns with her gaze. At first, nothing happened. The world lay still beneath the glittering dome of the heavens, the earth breathing quietly around her. Then, with a blink she nearly missed, another point of light went out. This time, she knew she hadn't imagined it. It was there one moment, bright and steady among the cluster of its neighbors, and then it wasn't. The darkness that replaced it looked the same as the first one, smooth, flat, and strangely dense. Her pulse quickened. She tried to think of a rational explanation, an airplane, some atmospheric distortion. But the night was clear, cloudless, and utterly still. The other stars sparkled on, undisturbed. It was only that one point of light, gone without flicker or fade. She stayed outside longer than she meant to, hoping to see if it would happen again, but the rest of the sky remained unchanged. Still, when she finally went back inside, she couldn't shake the image of those 2 points of blackness, fixed like holes punched through the night. The third night, she sat out earlier, wrapped tight in her blanket as the horizon faded from deep blue to black. She didn't bother with tracing constellations this time. Her eyes went directly to the empty patches. The first star that had vanished, the second, and now the rest. Waiting. It happened faster this time. She was watching the upper curve of Cassiopeia when one of its stars winked out. The absence left behind was identical to the others. Same smooth, unnatural black. The shape of the constellation was broken now, made strange by the missing piece. Her chest tightened. The night was no longer a comfort. Every time her gaze drifted, she felt the fear of what she might miss. The quiet around her seemed heavier, as though the fields, the trees, and the cold air were all leaning inward to watch with her. The fourth night, it was worse. The vanishings came in a pattern she couldn't predict, one near the horizon, one high overhead, another far to the west. She started counting without meaning to, whispering numbers under her breath until she realized she was doing it and stopped. By the fifth night, she didn't even pretend to look away from the sky. She lay on the blanket, eyes wide and stinging, waiting for the next disappearance. They happened steadily now. 5, 6, 7 in the span of a single night. The constellations were breaking apart, their familiar shapes dissolving into unconnected fragments. It was not just the vanishings that unsettled her. The blackness where the stars had been seemed wrong in a way she could feel but not name. The rest of the sky looked vast but shallow, as though painted on glass. The dark spots felt deeper, endless, as if she could fall into them if she stared too long. By the seventh night, half the sky was gone. She didn't bother keeping track of which constellations had been broken. There was only the blackness and the shrinking islands of light. The disappearances came faster now, like something was accelerating, working with deliberate intent. She stopped sleeping well. Even inside, with the curtains drawn, she felt the missing light pressing against the walls. The darkness outside the windows seemed thicker, heavier, as though the night itself was leaning closer. On the ninth night, she noticed something worse. The vanishings were silent, but now, just before each one happened, she thought she heard a faint sound, not a pop or crackle, but a soft rush, like breath drawn in through teeth. Each time, the hair on her arms lifted before she even registered the sound. By the 10th night, only a handful of stars remained. They were scattered randomly now, no longer forming the shapes she'd once known. The rest was pure black, unbroken, the void stretching from horizon to horizon. It was not the darkness of a normal night. It was a darkness that felt present, aware. She lay under it, unable to stop watching. Each time a star went, the black spot seemed to swell just slightly before merging seamlessly with the rest. The few remaining lights looked smaller, fragile. On the 11th night, only one star remained. She knew it before she even reached the hill. The whole sky was black except for a single pinprick of light hanging low and alone. She sat, knees drawn to her chest, and stared at it, knowing it was only a matter of time. The wind had stopped entirely. The world was silent except for her own breathing. She fixed her eyes on the last star. It trembled faintly, or perhaps that was her vision. The air felt tight, as if the night were holding itself in, waiting for something. When it happened, it was almost gentle. The light winked out without a sound, leaving her under a dome of perfect black. There was nothing above her now, nothing but the sense, overwhelming, undeniable, that the emptiness was not empty at all. The blackness above her was complete. It pressed down with a weight that felt almost physical, as though the sky itself had lowered until it rested against the top of her head. Without the stars, there was no sense of distance, no sense of infinity. The world felt small, enclosed, like the inside of a sealed room. Her breath came slow and careful, as though she feared making a sound might draw attention. Somewhere deep inside, she knew that whatever had taken the stars was not gone. It was here now, in the blackness, waiting. She could not see it. She could not hear it, and yet the certainty of its presence was absolute. The hill beneath her felt foreign, the grass sharp and brittle under her hands. The horizon had disappeared. There was no line where earth met sky. Everything above and around her was the same seamless dark, broken only by the faint, pale shape of herself when she glanced down. She thought about going inside, about slamming the door, pulling the curtains, shutting it out. But she knew instinctively that walls would make no difference. The blackness was not outside anymore. It was everywhere. Her eyes strained, searching for even the smallest hint of light, but there was none. And then, slowly, she realized that she was not looking into nothing at all. She was looking into something. It began as the faintest shift, a subtle suggestion of depth in the void overhead. The black was not uniform. There were places where it was somehow even darker, as though something moved just behind it. She blinked, and one of those darker spots widened, lengthening, curving like the edge of a shadow. A cold prickle crawled along the back of her neck. The shape was not random. It was too smooth, too deliberate. Another appeared beside it, mirroring the first, and the space between them glimmered faintly, not with light, but with a kind of reflective sheen, like the wet surface of an animal's eye. They were not stars. They were not distant. They were looking at her, her body locked in place, every muscle rigid. The eyes, if they were eyes, did not blink. They did not shift. They only stared, their size impossible to judge. They could have been the size of her hands and only a few feet away, or vast as oceans, hanging over the curve of the earth. She felt, rather than heard, the first vibration. It came through the ground, a low, slow pulse, like the beat of a colossal heart muffled by miles of earth. It rolled up through her legs into her chest and then faded, leaving behind a ringing emptiness in her ears. Another pulse followed, this one slightly stronger. The eyes narrowed not in aggression, but in something worse. Focus. The air around her grew dense. It felt as though she were breathing through cloth, each inhale slow and resisted. Her heartbeat had taken on the rhythm of the pulses beneath her, sinking without her consent. She could not look away. The longer she stared into those eyes, the more she felt herself leaning toward them, not with her body, but with something deeper. Images began to seep into her thoughts, not as pictures, but as impressions. A vast expanse of cold, an endless dark ocean with no surface or floor. The sensation of falling, but without wind or speed, only the knowledge that she would never stop. A whisper that was not sound, but meaning, threading into her mind in a language older than speech. Her own name surfaced in that whisper, drawn out, stretched thin. It was not spoken aloud. It resonated inside her, carrying with it the understanding that she had been noticed. The eyes moved for the first time, tilting slightly the way a predator might tilt its head before striking. The blackness around them shifted, and for a moment she thought she saw an outline, not of a body as she knew it, but of something immense and formless, its edges always vanishing before she could grasp them. Her knees gave way, and she found herself sitting on the cold ground, staring up like a child. The pulses in the earth grew closer together now, almost matching her breathing. She could feel the pull, not physical, but irresistible all the same, urging her to keep watching, to give herself over completely. The whisper returned, louder this time, filling her head until it drowned out every other thought. The meaning was simple. Come. She did not move, but she realized she was already going. The stars had not been erased. They had been removed, one by one, so that nothing would stand between her and this. Somewhere far below the surface of her awareness, she wondered how many others had stood on their own hills, in their own fields, staring up into the same blackness. How many had answered? How many had been waiting for her to join them? The eyes began to widen again, the blackness between them swelling until it seemed ready to swallow her whole. The horizon returned, not as land and sky, but as a line of dividing shadow, a threshold. Her breath caught. In that final instant, she thought she saw movement beyond the eyes, shapes upon shapes, crowding forward, silent and countless, each one bearing the same reflective gleam. Then the blackness folded inward. She found herself lying on her back, the blanket twisted under her, the grass damp against her skin. Above her, the stars had returned, every one of them in its place, cold and perfect. The constellations were whole again. The wind moved softly through the grass. The night was silent except for its breath. She sat up slowly, scanning the sky. Everything was exactly as it had been before the first star vanished. Too exactly. Her eyes found the patch where it had all begun. A single star seemed to burn there brighter than the rest, steady and fixed. It was watching her.